Liam had spent his entire childhood in the house across the street from Ethan and his son, Josh. Josh and Liam had been best friends since they were 6, and Liam had gotten used to having his friend's father around, yet always kept him at arm's length. Ethan was intimidating, serious, and someone that never quite meshed with the usual light-hearted dynamic he shared with Josh. Liam had often thought that Ethan had a sharp, calculating look, like a man who always observed and analyzed, seeing things that other people didn't notice, but this evening, as fate had it, things were different. It wasn't Josh he was spending the weekend with, but Ethan. Josh had a last-minute commitment for the weekend, leaving Liam alone in an awkward position. Ethan, ever the gracious host, invited him over for a drink and to hang out, though Liam hesitated initially, guilt weighing on him for bailing on Josh, he couldn't deny his curiosity. Ethan had always been pleasant, albeit quiet and reserved. Yet tonight, something in the air felt thick with an unspoken tension that it started off like any ordinary night. Ethan poured them both whiskey, his broad hand delicate as it poured the amber liquid into crystal glasses. They sat on opposite ends of the living room sofa, the dim glow of a table lamp casting shadows on Ethan's sharp features. A jazz record hummed in the background, lending an old-school, calming atmosphere to the place. "So, Liam," Ethan said, breaking the silence with a relaxed smile. "How've you been?" Liam couldn't help but feel a slight awkwardness. Ethan had always seemed more like an authoritative figure to him, the kind of man who might deliver a scolding if needed, a man with wisdom Liam didn't think he could relate to. But tonight, sitting across from him, Liam found himself fumbling for answers. "I've been good," he said, stuttering a little. "Same old stuff. I'm actually trying to figure out what's next after college. Josh probably told you about that." Liam rubbed the back of his neck, feeling like an overenthusiastic boy who didn't know what to say to a much older man. Ethan chuckled softly, as if the sound alone took away the tension. "He mentioned it. You've always been more cautious than Josh. He tends to rush into things," he observed. "Yeah, sometimes I feel like that's all he does," Liam said with a small smile, grateful to be in the company of someone who understood what he meant. For hours, they sat and talked, about the past, about the future, about the things that weighed heavily on both their hearts. Liam had learned a lot about Ethan that he hadn't known before. The man was not simply a father or a stern presence in the background, he was a person with thoughts, dreams, fears, all cloaked under layers of time. It intrigued Liam, as he'd never seen this side of Ethan, the vulnerability of it, even though it felt like he was being pulled deeper into unfamiliar territory. As the evening wore on, the boundaries of their relationship began to change. Something was happening, though neither of them acknowledged it directly. For once, they weren't just host and guest, or father and son's friend. There was an odd intimacy settling between them, subtle at first, but unmistakable. Liam leaned back, drained from their conversation. The hour was late, and though he didn't feel quite ready to leave, he figured it was time. Ethan, however, made a suggestion that left him speechless. "You should stay here tonight," Ethan said, setting his glass down. "Josh won't be here, and I don't want you driving back in the dark." The request felt natural, yet it struck a chord in Liam's chest. He hesitated, looking for an excuse to resist. "You know, I'm not sure that's a good idea," Ethan, perceptibly calm, simply smiled, his gaze steady but warm. "It's just for the night. No rush." Liam's heart skipped, yet a strange sense of comfort washed over him. He agreed, stepping out of the room to grab his things, thoughts spinning in circles. When they reached Ethan's room, it felt different than Liam imagined. It wasn't just a place where someone slept. The walls, dimly lit by a single bedside lamp, carried a sort of wisdom and history. And Ethan, he wasn't just his friend's dad. He was a man whose every movement carried quiet authority. "I'm just going to sleep on the couch, you don't mind, right?" Liam said, trying to downplay the awkwardness. "You're right. It's late." Ethan paused for a second, then slowly shook his head, almost thoughtfully. "Actually, I'm thinking it'd be best if you stayed here. On the bed." Liam's chest tightened in confusion and curiosity. His brain was moving 1,000 miles an hour. What was happening here? He was a young man, so why did this feel like something entirely different? Still confused but strangely compelled, Liam climbed into the bed, but only a moment passed before Ethan joined him. They faced one another, the room quiet except for the hum of the fan. Both of them lay silently at first, Liam doing his best to hold on to some semblance of normality. But the energy between them shifted, brewing beneath the surface in ways both unsettling and undeniable. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low but firm, like he had been waiting for this moment for so long. I think you know what's happening, Liam. Ethan's words lingered in the air, before he even let Liam respond. I've wanted this for a long time. Liam's heart raced, mind spinning. His throat was dry, this was beyond anything he'd imagined. But in that moment, as the cold sweat built up on his palms and his chest tightened, a strange impulse pulled at him, telling him to stay. Stay where this tension led. The sound of his own voice was a tremor when he asked, "What are you talking about?" Ethan turned to face him, his body now inches away, the air between them pulsing with an electric warmth. I'm not asking you to understand all at once, Liam. But you've never been just Josh's best friend to me. From the moment you walked through that door tonight, something changed. Liam's lips parted in shock. Before he could speak, Ethan continued, do you realize how much of you has always belonged to me? How every time I look at you, all I can think about is you being here, right now. Ethan paused, almost reflecting on his own thoughts. Liam, you've never been just an innocent kid in my house. I've seen you grow up. I've noticed things, about you, that most people wouldn't catch. The way you look at me. The way you always hesitate before you speak. Suddenly, their proximity felt overwhelming. Ethan reached out, brushing his fingers along Liam's cheek. This, Liam, Ethan whispered, it's not a question anymore. You're here with me, and I want you, fully, completely. In that moment, everything seemed to fall into place, and yet nothing made sense. The desire that flickered in Ethan's eyes was not unfamiliar. Liam could see it, as he had been unknowingly caught in its pull. Slowly, tentatively, he nodded, whispering barely audibly, I don't know what's happening. And Ethan kissed him, soft, slow, yet urgent, as if it was the only way they could both explain what neither of them had been brave enough to voice until now. The weight of their connection sank in, and in the hours that followed, the two of them finally, unspoken, claimed the uncharted space between them. Liam had never known love could be this heavy, yet this simple. He had never known that a bond could tie you so tightly, so completely, that one could not exist without the other. In the morning, nothing would be the same. But for now, there was just them. The weeks that followed that night were filled with a tension Liam couldn't escape. The memory of Ethan's kiss, soft, fervent, and all-encompassing, had planted itself deep in his mind. Every glance, every unspoken word between them now felt charged with something unspoken. Yet the uncertainty of their situation lingered like an uninvited guest. Josh, oblivious to the shifting dynamics, continued to invite Liam over, acting as if nothing had changed. He'd still often joke about the awkward moments they'd shared as kids, and it irritated Liam how carefree his best friend could be, entirely unaware of the undercurrent that had formed between his father and him. That made Liam's feelings so much more complicated, especially because the last thing he wanted was to hurt Josh. But as the days wore on, he couldn't deny the jealousy that bubbled inside him. One evening, everything changed. Liam had arrived early, letting himself into Ethan's home as usual. It had become a quiet routine, a way to avoid confronting Josh about his growing unease. Ethan wasn't home yet, so Liam decided to sit on the back porch and wait, staring out into the fading light of the afternoon. It was peaceful, but with every minute that passed, his mind spun, wondering whether this whole thing, his connection to Ethan, was a mistake.